Are there any citizens wishing to address the committee today? None signed in? Great. I'd like to call for approval of the minutes. Motion by Ms. DuBose and Dr. Weber, second? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Great. I don't have much of a committee chair report. We've got a short open session and a longer closed session, so I'd like to go ahead and, Ron, you and your team come on up and we'll get started.
All right. Let's see. Make sure if I can get this to work here. We can get the slides up, Jeffrey. Okay, all right. There we go. Well, wanted to back this back a little bit. Wanted to today update you all on, in the open session, update you all on some key activities that we are performing. One of the things before I get into that you'll notice at this meeting, there's not an ERM report, which I typically give. We are in the process, just to give you a quick blurb on that before I begin, we're in the process of completing the patient access and the care coordination risk profiles. And, you know, and I was sitting in on finance, and I know all understand and appreciate the challenge in patient access at JPS. And so I'm working with the various leaders around that risk profile, and my intent is to have both of those presented to this committee at the next meeting in August. That, as you would imagine, they're very involved, and I want to make sure that we have the right information before we present to the committee. The only other thing I would say with respect to ERM that we're working on right now is it's that time again to renew our insurance for the district for fiscal 18, and so as we do every year at the next meeting in August, I believe at the Finance Committee at Steve's meeting, we'll present our insurance proposal for the upcoming year. So with all of that, one of the things I start with compliance is headlines and industry trends. And I know, I don't take any relish in the misfortune of others, but I think this is important for us to understand what is happening in the regulatory activity sense. There are two new cases. One of them is fairly close to home in Houston. Memorial Hermann, which many of you are familiar with, was recently fined $2.4 million, and this was really I'll put it in my words, kind of an oversight or stupidity on their part, because it really shouldn't have happened. Because what drove this was there was a patient that presented at one of the Memorial Hermann clinics, and the patient presented a fraudulent ID card to get medical care. To the credit of the staff, they recognized that it looked fraudulent, identified authorities, that person was arrested, and so all of that was good. What happened after that was that the organization sent out a press release indicating that this had occurred, and in the press release put the name of the patient and, and the name of the patient and some other information, and that was signed off by senior management, which made it even worse. And they also right. And they also put it on their website. They had other public meetings, including with state senators, that they mentioned this incident. Mentioned the patient's name specifically. And so the OCR really didn't have any choice. I mean, it was so public that they had to respond, and that's why I'm saying, unfortunately, this was really due to stupidity. I mean, they should have known better, and that's what the OCR said, is that senior management should have known they couldn't have done that. So they had to pay $2.4 million for that error. They also had to retrain their workforce, in the process of retraining their workforce on what's a permissible disclosure of patient information across the organization. The second case, CardioNet. CardioNet is the first case where you have a wireless provider. They basically provide remote monitoring for folks that have heart monitors for cardiac arrhythmias, and they have obviously patient information for all of those. And so what happened, and this is not a new scenario, there was a lost laptop, and the lost laptop was not encrypted. They had almost 1,400 patients on the laptop, and so that was a breach. They also, when looking at the organization, did not have a sufficient risk analysis neither did they have a sufficient risk management plan. And then when they asked for policies, their privacy and security policies, they gave them draft policies that were not even implemented yet. And so they deemed that they did not take HIPAA seriously and were not enough along, so they paid $2.5 million probably in the last couple of months, and also are subject to a corrective action plan. So again, I bring these up not necessarily to pick on other organizations, but really to emphasize, you know, the reason why we focus on this stuff so much. There is real financial penalty to it. And in that regard, transitioning to the JPS context, one of the things that we did recently is an incident response workshop. Beasley is our cyber liability insurance provider, and they offered free of charge as a client a incident response workshop where we can go through scenario planning around if these kinds of incidents were to happen at JPS, how would we communicate, who would be involved, and all of that. And so we had facilities, we had legal, we had finance, we had various parties, IT of course, in this workshop for a day, and it was a good activity. And then from that, we're developing an incident response plan. And then the other component of our follow-up, which we'll get to in the second piece of this, is our mock audit that we are. I know I've been talking about this for a little while. We are finally at a point where we've gone through the RFP process. We've gotten 3 vendors, and we're going through the oral presentations here in the next couple of weeks, and hopefully we'll have one presented, and obviously we'll have to go through the contracting process, but we're hoping to have this mock audit done, you know, started at least before the end of fiscal 17, or certainly by the end of the calendar year. This is really designed to, if OCR were to, again, to audit JPS, like they're doing a lot of hospitals, you know, how would we do? It's like a mock test, basically. And so the vendor, the consultant, would stand in the shoes of the regulator, issue the letter as if they were the regulator. We would respond, go through that process, and be able to exercise our response process. And it's a prudent measure, and compared to the, you know, couple to $3 million that are being fined, it's a good preventative measure. So, questions on any of those? So, okay. Let's see, under information updates and discussion topics, board email community. Oh, I'm sorry, I failed to mention. The reason why Irma's not here, she had a loss in her family, and so certainly thoughts and prayers are with her and her family. I think she lost her sister this morning, so her oldest sister. So you know, thoughts and prayers are with her. I didn't say who it was. I didn't say who it was. Let's see, board email communication. So this is just a reminder that we that we're going to try to follow a consistent process in how we communicate with you all as board members. So one, from a standpoint of if you have questions for us that we need to respond to if you could get those to me, and I can make sure to work through Tammy and Scott to get a coordinated response back. And also, just to emphasize, I know we've talked with Roger in terms of just having a coordinated process, because one of the things, and this kind of delves into my third topic in terms of board communications, is the risk assessment process. Many of you know that I've reached out to you in the last couple of years about speaking about what you consider some risk to the organization, and we've had either phone conversations or in-person meetings. I'm making that offer to you again this year if you're so inclined. And so please let me know. We have this process underway, and so what we typically do, just as a reminder, is we look at what our historical experience has been. What do we know is happening at JPS, or what do we know? What are known concerns? So those would be factored in. We also consider regulatory activity like the ones I talked about here that's happening in the market. We talk about we talk to key leaders. We're going to talk to executives and other key leaders to get their input. And then, of course, we know institutionally some things that we just need to continue to clean up based upon what we've reported to you in the past. So I didn't want to conclude that process, because without offering to you all as board members the opportunity, if you want to speak with with me and Michelle on other concerns you might have that we want to factor into our plans for fiscal 18. Again, our plan, as is the case every year, is to try to present our plans for fiscal 18 at the August Governance Committee meeting, which would be the next meeting, so they could seek approval for those plans and then go into fiscal 18 to execute. So, questions? Any questions on that? Okay. I think from a compliance standpoint, that's my only update. The other component I think we're going to discuss in closed. The only other thing I'll refer you to, and you may have already seen this already, is on the board portal is our standard reports around our work plan updates as well as our compliance dashboard. Certainly, if there's any questions on any of those, I'm happy to take those as well. But
All right. Anybody have any questions?
Okay. You got me twisted because I'm usually on that side.
Do we have to do any of those for action?
I'm sorry?
You're going through the ethics point,
Yes, that's in the dashboard. So the Ethics Point is our hotline provider. Well, no, it's on the portal. That's why I made it the statement I just made. If there's any questions about the dashboard or the work plan updates, I'm happy to take those. Typically, those are how many hotline calls that we get for the period, as you're used to seeing. As is typically the case, most of those are HIPAA related, privacy related. But I didn't have anything specific on any of those unless there's questions.
I have one question on the management awareness. When it says, do not know, did not wish to disclose, is that the person calling in the complaint?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they didn't wish to disclose that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
We're ready? Internal audit?
So internal audit would give you a formal brief periodically on the status of our audit plan. There were 10 projects that you approved last year for board reporting, and those 10 are here before you. 6 are brand-new audit projects. Those cycle through about every 2 to 3 months. So the cycle time, it does take a while before internal audit starts an engagement and does research and finalizes a project. The 4 at the bottom are follow-ups to reports that you have heard in the past. And today, as a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and give you a quick update on the Health Information Management report that we did in 2015. In October, I reported that there were 8 issues. 6 had been resolved and 2 had not. The 2 that were not, are now officially addressed to the extent that the risk is now rated low, which means, typically it's an acceptable level of risk. Those included the remote coders. We had some susceptible or vulnerabilities there with personal computers, and so what we've done is formalized the issuance of JPS hardware to all of our remote coders. And so now they're properly scanned with software and malware updates, and so we've sort of closed that vulnerability there to a HIPAA breach to the extent that we could. And then lastly, the outpatient clinic coding. We did have some opportunity with the outpatient side of our coders being audited regularly for productivity and quality. And so what they've done now is extended a contract to include an external vendor looking at these charts, 30 charts per coder per quarter. So they now are up to, that's 3,840 charts, there's 32 coders, so per year that they're now looking at these charts. So I do want to caveat one thing about the coders. We reduce the risk to low, not because we're attesting to the accuracy of the coding. What we are attesting to is that we now have a process in place to monitor and audit the coders. Does that make sense? So that's why there's a hardened process now. Okay. Any questions on that at all?
If you found variations on a code, do you report that here or handle that internally?
So that's a good question. So the external coders report to the leadership of HIM all their results, and they have an opportunity to dispute those, and they have an opportunity to train on the mistakes and the trends that they see. That stays internal to HIM. The only reason this came out was because we had an intentional audit of HIM from an internal audit perspective. This was the first and only internal audit has ever done on HIM, and we probably won't revisit them for probably another 3 years,
Yeah.
3 to
Well,
5
but-
years.
But from a compliance perspective, and I know Madura may be back there, but she reports to the compliance committee periodically, and compliance committee meets every other month. And one of the standard reports that she gives is progress that they're making in this area of coding accuracy. She actually just did a report at the last compliance committee meeting as well. So it is something that's going to be monitored ongoing, even if it's not from an internal audit perspective.
Here's my question, so where I'm going. Does the compliance committee and claim get the report GMAT? Don't they sort of ride you guys' backs when you do coding? Isn't that given over to a claim to do?
Well, actually, Acclaim is hiring, or I think they may have already hired a coder specifically for professional coding that looks at charts similar to what we do on the inpatient side in HIM. And that is actually another great question. One of the things that they asked me to do was to go to, Irma and I attended the Acclaim board meeting, earlier this year, prior to them hiring this person, and say, okay, how are we going to communicate compliance-related concerns? And so we help them with their compliance plan for Acclaim, and have an agreement that whatever they find from a professional billing standpoint with this position, that they'll notify us so that we can, from a monitoring standpoint. Yeah.
Can I answer any questions about the other questions about HIM? If not, that's all I have for open.
Thank you. Those were just for your information. There's no approval necessary. We will go now to a closed session at 12:15, 12:14.